Go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is an infrastructure project workshop for the City of Keystone Heights. Today's date is October 27th. Ms. Wachowski, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Lake,
Here.
Vice Mayor Hart,
Here.
Councilman Bobby Brown,
Here.
Councilman Tony Brown,
Present.
Councilwoman Kelly.
Here.
You have a quorum, Madam Mayor, but this isn't a voting meeting, so everybody's here.
Right. And so we move on to public comment cards. Are there any?
I do not have any public comment cards. I do have Mr. Rashar from DRMP in to speak to any number of these items for discussion.
Okay. So we're going to start with item A, project priorities. I'll turn it over to Ms. Wachowski. You've made a list for us.
Yes, Madam Mayor and members of council, you have a list of projects I've collected from all members of council and then also consulted with our engineering firm. Just for city projects in the upcoming years, we do have the Arpa funding. If you turn to page 2, that you'll be able to see what both of our ARPA and our CIP budgets look like, our funds available. And this is just really a time for council to get together, discuss some of your projects out in the open, talk about what are priorities so that we have a clear vision on how to move forward with this. So if you like, Madam Mayor, I can do a quick scope overview of all the projects that are listed, or however you would like to handle this meeting.
I think I prefer to do them one at a time and go in depth with each one of them.
Absolutely.
And that way we can ask questions of each project as we go.
Sure.
Is council okay with that?
Just fine.
Okay, then let's move in that direction.
Okay, absolutely. The first item on your list of projects is the Keystone Heights Airport Water and Wastewater Project. We have been in conversations for years now about the need for water sewer out in the airport. Last conversations with CCUA was that we needed a feasibility study. So we asked AECOM, the city and the airport talked to AECOM, their airport engineer, to draft a scope and fee for the feasibility study. We do have that scope and fee. The cost is $135,000 roughly. This feasibility study is needed to understand the true needs of water, wastewater at the airport so that we can move forward with the best possible solution to get that out there. Mr. Bill Prang from AECOM is here to answer any questions, as well as David Kirkland from the airport. The ask is really if the council would consider funding a majority of it or some of it, part of it, from our ARP funding to move forward with water, wastewater at the airport.
Okay, would you mind coming up? Thank you. Mr. Prang, it's nice having you. Different chamber room, but you're used to this, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Questions from council. Well, let's let Mr. Prang go ahead and describe exactly what it is you want us to under.
Sure. I think, as Lynn mentioned, every facility at the airport now operates on well and septic. And for small facilities, that's normally suitable. One thing that is notable is fire protection water is provided at the airport through an above-ground storage tank. So just to give you an idea of occasionally a larger facility or a facility that needs fire protection typically can't operate on just a well and septic system. So one of the projects that the airport and the city and Bradford County are working on is to build a road to open up some industrial park development area on airport property. It would be both for aviation use and non-aviation use, but one of the limiting factors there is a lack of municipal potable water and sanitary sewer service. So it's probably been just a few years for me that I started meeting with the airport staff and city staff and CCUA. CCUA does have lines in the vicinity of the airport, and when we met with them last, they said they would need a feasibility report to determine whether it was feasible for them to extend their lines both for water and sewer onto the airport. The feasibility report will focus on studying the master plan for the airport, which we completed several years ago, looking at the industrial park development, other aviation and non-aviation development, to calculate potable water flows, and then to calculate the amount of waste that would be generated, sanitary sewer waste, from future development. We'll be looking generically at a 20-year time frame which is kind of the time frame of the airport master plan. And the end goal of the study will be not only to have numerical values for how much water, gallons per day, we'll also be able to estimate the amount of pressure that's needed from CCUA, and then we'll be able to estimate the amount of sewage flow that's generated on a gallons per day basis. We'll also be doing a preliminary level of network layout of water lines and sewer lines, including connections back to the existing terminus points of where Clay County's facilities are.
Okay. Any questions from council? Questions?
You mentioned 20 years. What was that benchmark again?
An airport master plan typically has a 20-year time horizon.
All right. How long would it take to actually do the study? roughly?
I think the study is probably a 6-month
Okay.
time frame,
quick
4
turnaround.
to 6 months. It's relatively quick.
Yeah. Now,
Again, we already have the airport master planning data because we generated that,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm the regular airport consultant for the airport now, so I'm aware of all their future plans.
Yeah, you mentioned long-term development, maybe commercial of a commercial type, and when these guys go out and do a 30-minute windshield job, they want to know what you have for facilities, and right
Yep.
now, you don't really have it. So I would be very much in favor of that, for that reason and for the safety reason that you're going to be adding more safety with the water, so.
Yep. Yeah, one asset the airport has is land.
Yeah.
And so I think the airport staff and Lynn and city staff have been working on finding ways to charge and supercharge what's available as an asset and turn it into commercial, good types of commercial, light industrial,
Yep.
and aviation development.
Yep.
Part of the industrial park faces the airfield proper, the runway and taxiway system. Another part of it is more facing State Road 100. So you can kind of imagine the aviation uses would be towards the airport. The non-aviation uses would be on the other side. A lot of times we find, those things go together. There are sometimes non-aviation businesses that want to locate at an airport because perhaps they own an aircraft as part of their business. So they like to be at the airport just for the convenience of, even though their business proper doesn't require the airport, it's a place to keep their airplane and to go to their various project sites.
Okay, and I go back to Lynn. We have asked for this amount through the state, have we not?
We have asked for the larger amount of price tag of up to $30 million from the state to complete the project that happens after the feasibility study. That was one of the conversations of the $135,000 seems to be an easier ask than the $30 million for the project infrastructure. There's funds that are available, from my understanding. Water, wastewater, water sewer is a big component in the funds that are being available from both federal and state dollars. So once we get past this feasibility study, we're pretty confident that we'll be able to secure grants and additional funding for it. But it's this $135,000 that seems to be a hiccup, if you will,
Okay.
our catching point.
Well, I certainly think it's an important project, absolutely.
So the conversation really is that, and then Mr. Kirkland can probably speak better to this, is a possibility of cost sharing of, everybody's likes the idea of the feasibility study, but we're really coming down to who's putting dollars in it.
Yeah, well, I feel like we should have skin in the game,
So
absolutely.
I agree.
Down at the Brown end,
Well, this Brown would say this is something that we've looked at doing for years, and it's something, seeing what the airport is today and where it's come from 30, 40 years ago, we need to, I agree with you guys about we need to step it up and do this feasibility. My question is, does this have anything to do, I know it says wastewater and sewer and everything, but the road that was supposed to go in 20 years ago off of 100 to make it better for like your European racetrack people coming in with all those expensive cars, does that have anything to do with this
Well,
feasibility?
I don't want to speak in front of Mr. Kirkland, but the road project is still active and ongoing. It's being pursued. It's part of the larger development plan, but this study does not specifically
strictly for the
advance
sewer.
the road per
Okay.
se. But this would be a study to provide water and sewer to the same industrial park development area that the road will serve.
Okay.
This water and sewer study will also look at existing airport infrastructure, all along existing airport road. We're going to try to provide water and sewer to the entire airport, existing facilities and future development areas.
Can't imagine CCUA would turn this down if you put in the proper paperwork, because they're gonna have so many good, high-quality ratepayers down the road. That's just good planning from their standpoint, too.
I can't speak for
No, I
CCUA,
know
but
you can't.
yeah, I think that sounds like good logic from where I sit.
Yeah.
Putting
and-
pressure on would be kind of nice.
Well, they've said in conversations, if you want us to consider this and move forward on it, you need to put skin in the game, using your term, and bring us the numbers. What are the real numbers? How much water do you need? How much waste will you generate? And how will that come in over time? A project like this, I don't think a project like this spends $30 million on day one. It's probably a phased construction project, so that will be imagined in the feasibility study to look at 2 or maybe 3 phases of pushing the system into the airport, on the airport
The
property.
payback on this would be so huge as compared to the initial cost. To me, it just makes sense.
There's also, if I might add, just, it's not my bailiwick per se, but one of the intangibles to this is getting people off of septic systems.
Yeah.
And I know that's sensitive in all of Florida, but particularly in this area. So moving towards that as a long-term goal, it brings that intangible benefit.
Okay, I like it. Project 1.
If it's consensus of the council, then I don't know how you would like to see the funding split up, or if you're looking at.
Can we go through first
Yeah, absolutely, but as far as,
where we use the
continuing-
money?
yes.
Yeah, let's go through the projects first, please.
Okay. The next item on your list is the CRA grant, and I removed the facade grant because we talked at the last CRA meeting to discuss things like parking improvements, lighting, and things of that nature. The grant currently is with DRMP. They're doing their once or twice over on that to help facilitate some of the conversations about parking and lighting. But I know that this is part of the conversations that we've had. We do have funding set aside, $50,000 that's within our agency. However, because of it being an economic improvement to our downtown area, it's also eligible for ARP funding.
Okay. So then let's go and talk about, let me see, which one can we buddy that up with? Okay, so we've talked about several plans that we wanted to create, the master plan, the street inventory plan. Can you talk about the different plans and where you see that money coming from?
So we have budgeted within our CIP some funding for some of these plans to go ahead and move forward. One of the things that we're looking at with our streetscape is the parking inventory, but then we'll be looking as a whole citywide plan that would not be eligible for ARP funding, that would come out of the $75,000 possibly that's already allocated
Okay.
under CIP.
Okay, so then the Parks and Rec master plan and design, this is a new idea for a new master plan.
This is a separate idea of the whole, or component really, if you will, a drilled down of the whole citywide master plan. We've had several conversations over the past years of different parks, and we've got a couple of projects that are almost finished, not quite there, and then we move on to a different park. And talking with DRMP, and Mr. Richard can speak to this a little bit better, or with us as well, the need of a master plan for the parks. When we talk about the possibility of adding a splash park or resurfacing, reconstructing our tennis courts, adding pickleball or 2, things of that nature, really getting an idea of what it is we want to offer our community and then how to best go about that. It's easier to track down grants that way if we have a master plan so that we really know what our end goals are.
Okay, Mr. Richard, would you like to come forward?
Yes, ma'am.
So-
Can you give me an idea of how all of these master plans are kind of going to dovetail together and what it will look like from the beginning to the end?
Yes, can we just start with the Parks Master Plan, the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, because I think that's a good example to work off of. And so Ms. Rutowski said it very well. When you have a master plan and you have an evaluation done, it sets the stage of critical success. So whenever you're pursuing funding sources, if there's a master plan already in place, that is the first checkbox in order to be qualified to do that. And so a master plan is simply looking at your assets. So we already have designated areas in this community that are municipal owned and serve as a recreational asset to the community and beyond. However, what isn't clearly identified is the goal of those, recognizing the tennis courts. We know that you're going to play tennis there, or you can skateboard there, or you can do whatever sport that folks tend to do. However, the nature park, for example, there are opportunities there beyond what it serves today. This park over here, more of a passive recreation park, maybe a pocket park is what would commonly be termed. Is there an interest by council, by the community, by others to add additional resources to it, to rehabilitate it, to change its use? And so whenever a master plan compartmentalizes essentially all your different areas, and it provides what its existing use is and the potential for additional uses. Another good example is Geneva Jungle. I'm of the opinion, an observation, that it's probably ending its available lifespan. It's been loved to death for a long time, and perhaps the city would be considering something to the effect of renovating that park in the near future, whatever that may mean. But if you fall under the umbrella of a master plan and that's already been identified and you can phase it out, there are several buckets of cost share and or grant funding that become available that won't be available unless a professional study is done to identify a needs assessment and then also a preliminary budget to go with it.
Okay. Any questions? Any questions? And so we would look at funding that either through grant funding or our CIP. It's not eligible for ARP.
That's correct. And so I believe through conversations that there's potential grants out there to do a master plan for planning.
There can be some cost share funding. However, the vast majority of the funding will come from construction. Usually, just like our just recent discussion as far as putting forth the effort from a municipal level to invest in it. Usually it's that master plan study that gets you there, and then after that, a lot of grant opportunities come up. To the best of my knowledge, it's possible that the FERDAP program may be able to assist with master planning, but I would anticipate at least that the majority of the funding would come out of your CIP. That would be your investment, and then your payback would be a lot of opportunities for an infusion of funding to best fit the city.
Okay. Ballpark figure, what do you think that type of master plan fund would cost?
It could be done for approximately, I hate to put values to things because it really depends on the scope. Okay, so there's a lot of, you can start at a high level, and that's what we would do. My approximation would be roughly $30,000. And that
Okay.
would cover all of your municipal park areas, including the trailhead for the new trail. That would be included in it.
Okay. And Sunrise as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And-
All right.
And Azalea,
And Azalea?
and I have, if you give me a second, I would like to just throw my 2 cents worth in for a memory thing.
Yes, sir.
Several years ago, when we did talk about this back here, redoing it, one of the biggest things, and I probably am not gonna be here when all this is done, so, a handicap swing, where these kids can come up that are in wheelchairs or something, and they can hook up their wheelchair and they can swing just like everybody else.
Yes.
I would like to see that happen.
So just for your general awareness, the team that would be working on this has done several playgrounds. We just completed one in the city of Titusville, and that had CDBG funding and to the tune of $500,000. That funding was directly used for what's called ADA accessibility and inclusivity.
Yeah.
And so any of the parks design would take into account the fact that it would be ADA accessible. As it stands now, Geneva Jungle is not ADA accessible by current standards. And so you would move towards having the flexibility of opening up the park system to the widest audience possible.
Absolutely. All right, any other questions?
I want to go ahead and throw it out there and make a public statement about Geneva Jungle. I was part of that. You were probably part of that. And there was a lot of good people that helped build that. And actually that Geneva Jungle was the start of a chain throughout this area where different cities did the same thing, St. Augustine, Palaca. The thing is, some of them already tore them down. The maintenance on this thing, and it's been there, what, 20 years now, probably?
Longer.
Is it longer than that? Well, I would think it would behoove the city to really look at, when you're doing your study, is just tear it out, put something more feasible, like everybody else has been doing. I mean, I know there's a lot of sweat and tears and probably some cussing that went into building that thing, but I think it's served its time. And for safety reasons, I think the city needs to look at doing something different.
And maintenance, I think, the maintenance
The
too.
maintenance is a big thing.
And if I may, the city of Tavares went through the same struggle. So it is the same general manufacturer that was in the city of Tavares, and they were struggling every day with their maintenance. And also, it got to the point where it's just not serving the same purpose. And so we were very fortunate to participate in that park redesign. And I'd be happy to share what we've done for the city of Tavares to that regard. But that's a whole master plan in itself. But we would be very interested in assisting the city through that process. But the master plan would set the stage of success for funding opportunities such as CDBG.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Beach parking lot.
Madam Mayor, the rest of the items that fall under page 1 really would fall under the Parks and Recs master plan and design. However, these are specific items that have been called out, that one that we can act quickly on, or two that a member of council wanted to speak directly to. So the first one is the beach parking lot. If you go over there, you notice that the striping is faded. We do need to restripe for our kayak launch area, which, crossing our fingers, hopefully will be delivered tomorrow.
Excellent.
We're waiting to see it based on weather and actual timing. But with that being said, we do have from Councilman Peoples the parking space and proper signage for the wounded veteran spot, things of that nature. And so there's several different ways that we can approach this. One, to restripe the parking lot as is would be roughly about $4,000, adding on the purple parking spot and then the kayak launch area, the designated area. After speaking with Mr. Richard and doing some of our walks downtown, we do have a secondary approach, which would cost of about $3,500 worth of engineering, and then roughly $8,200, and we'll have to get quotes on this, for construction and completion, would be a resurface and then a redesign of the park the redesign of the parking lot to make it more accessible and user friendly.
Would that be permanent, or would it have to be redone? Would it be a long-term?
Yes,
fix?
this is a long-term solution. So if you look at the if I may.
No, go right ahead,
If
please.
you look at the existing striping, it really doesn't meet current standards for circulation of traffic.
Right.
There's no right in, right out arrows.
You don't even know where the driveway is, really.
Correct. So what we call the circulation of traffic is not in good condition. Furthermore, for the vast majority of municipal parking lots, when you have the opportunity to do angled parking, because that's the safest way to back out, and so that restricts the opportunities for accidents with pedestrians. Furthermore, in our opinion, we would like to see the parking lot top seal coated. The mill and resurface is not necessary at this time. That provides you 5+ years worth of benefit to having a new surface. It's actually the best way to get into a restriping job, because you don't have to physically remove the paint. You have a brand new surface. It's clean. It looks nice, and then the restriping would follow in right behind it.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. So that would be CIP.
And that's one of those low-hanging fruit that we
Yeah.
can accomplish quickly to start moving forward in
Yes.
that direction.
We like low-hanging fruit, Ms. Witkowski. At least I do. We've talked about the restroom improvements.
This is something that's already been approved by council. I'm bringing it up because there's two different pots of money that it can come from. One is the Arpa Funding, then the next one we've already have it semi-allocated in CIP. We do have sheer construction under contract for this renovation, and it's going to cost us roughly about $280,000 to both add on a pavilion restroom and redo the restrooms that are down there currently. and bring them up to ADA compliant. With that being said, it's just a matter of council discussion on which pot it comes from. And
Okay.
then we'll talk about this more on the agenda of a timeline.
Okay. Keystone Beach, the stage.
So again, this is a project that we've requested from Sheer Construction, moving forward with the covered picnic area that's just to the left of Geneva Jungle, and then redoing the stage is gonna cost roughly about $160,000 from Sheer Construction. We can look at both ARPA funding and CIP for this if it's something that the council wishes to move forward with. It is, both items I do see a big need for if we want to move forward with completing that beach area.
Right. So for Geneva Jungle and the Splash Park, do you guys have any heartburn if we move that to the side and make a decision about the Parks and Rec master plan?
I'd like to speak to the splash park. When we were up north in Wisconsin visiting family, my youngest daughter and her family lived directly across the street from a splash park in a city of 12,000. That place was constantly busy. And it had this kind of cool arrangement where you would push a button and stuff, water would come out, and I'm sure it was recycled. And then addressing your point about the playground equipment, they also incorporated some very user-friendly modern playground equipment at the same time. When I was campaigning and I mentioned that, hey, I would like to see a splash park, 100% of the people, especially with young kids, were in favor of it. So I think it's something that the community wants, and I know we've had a brief discussion about putting it across the street, and I think that's a perfect fit. So I wouldn't move it particularly to the side. I'd like to keep it on the front burner, but yes, incorporate that into the plan.
Yes, sir. We'd be more than happy to do that.
Yeah.
We could come up with preliminary sketches as part of that. So if the city wanted, if you had certain projects that you wanted highlighted in addition to the master plan, it would not be an issue to come up with some sketches to ensure that it fit. Basically from a footprint standpoint, that it's going to fit within that zone, and to make sure that all the ADA and fall zone requirements are incorporated into those sketches.
And there is a need for that. There
Yes.
is a need in the community for that, in my opinion.
And I'll share my professional opinion. Areas around other clients that we serve that have splash parks, it's amazing how much attention that they get, and it's very impactful to the community. Community pools aren't really a thing anymore in most cases. The insurance liability is very problematic. They're very expensive. Not to say that splash parks don't come at some expense, and they do require some level of maintenance. However, from it being inclusive, everyone can participate in a splash park.
It's low risk too, so
Yes.
the parents are there,
Yes.
little toddlers are running around getting wet and just having a good time.
Your liability is very low on a
Yeah.
relative scale.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
kind of agree with that. I visited Lake Butler's Park.
Yeah.
Couldn't really find Palacus. I think I was close enough I could smell it, but I couldn't find it in their complex. But
Google usually does a pretty good job.
usually, yeah.
Usually, but sometimes Google can get you
Sometimes I've
lost.
been put off in the middle of a cow pasture.
Yeah, there you
and
go.
stuff like that. But I think keeping them separate would, now that I've gotten into it, I think is a wonderful idea, because your little kids aren't having to compete with the other kids. Here comes the volleyball and everything else.
I do think it needs
Easier
to be
for the mothers
separate,
and stuff.
as you do. I also think if we get into a master plan, we really need to look at the use of each park and designate a specific use for each park. For example, we've not been able to pass an alcohol ordinance because council members feel strongly about children and alcohol being in the same place. So if we're going to have a master plan and we really want to turn the pavilion into a conference center or a center that can be used, then we need to look at keeping that as an adult-type feature versus a combination of children and adults, so that we can maximize that specific asset. And so if this is something that we're doing, I think we should keep all of those things in mind.
And if we're going to be doing the study on the parking, that would tie into this, because there's plenty of land over there for parking, and we just need to have a common sense arrangement so kids are safe.
Yes, sir. We would all take that all
Yeah.
into account. And I do believe there's more than sufficient space in order to work with, but the parking size, the area allotted to parking would have to increase to some capacity.
Be paved.
I'd throw my 2 cents on that too. I got a lot of 2 cents today. We were on vacation last week, I think. And we went to the Chattanooga Zoo, and they have a splash park. Now, it wasn't open. I kind of had to go somewhere I wasn't supposed to so I can take some pictures, but it's pretty nice, pretty nice. It's open and big, so.
Okay, so we've, the theme park. Lynn, did you want to do anything about the theme park out of CIP this year on short term? Is there any low-hanging fruit in the theme park?
So there's a couple of things that we can, one, just for your visibility, to continue further conversations with this, is that the tennis court and the basketball court will have to be reconstructed. We've had several different quotes. We cannot get anybody to come out here and resurface. We have to take it down to the bare bones and build again. There's foundation issues with that. One of the conversations that we had at the last council meeting is some of our playground equipment. With that being said, we reached out to Community Church right around the corner here. They do have that blue playground equipment, and they are willing to sell it as is to the city for $5,000. Now that means that we will have to contract somebody to come and remove and then install, but for as far as playground equipment goes, that's fairly inexpensive. And so I wanted to bring that to the attention of council if you were looking at doing some quick fixes, what you had in mind that is available for as long as it's available until somebody else picks it up.
Okay,
So
I have no problem with that.
I do think that the tennis courts needs to be
Taken down to the,
taken all the way down.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been dealing with this for years, and it's just, it needs to be done right.
yeah.
And I think last council meeting, you said the lights weren't working or something, so we need to,
that's going to have to be part of
Yeah.
a larger plan once council decides to move forward with it, because we'll have to redo some of
Yeah.
that underneath.
And I see pickleball's in the mix if we do that, and that's gotten huge. And I know a lot of pickleball players are not playing on our courts at Sunrise just because apparently they're uneven. At least that's
There's
what I've
some
been told.
discrepancies with that court, and
Yeah.
and that's a conversation that I've had with several different individuals as far as what they see, and then this is one for council. We do know that the Clay County is offering pickleball. That we're
Yes.
doing the Twin Lakes Pickleball Court, and then there's also pickleball if you have your own net, correct, over at Little Rain Lake
Well,
Park.
they can do it, they can play on two courts as it is right now at Little Rain with the tennis net.
But there are no lights out there.
But there's no lights out there.
And the lights is one of the features those pickleball players really want, and we have one light out at ours.
And we do have that specific court listed in just a couple of minutes under this project. This is talking specifically for the theme park. If council chooses to restripe and do dual striping for pickleball as well as tennis courts, if you want to create a separate pickleball court out at Sunrise and then talk about additional lighting, I do have some prices for that as well. But with that being said, I just wanted to bring to light the playground opportunity. Some of that is old, we can replace it right now if that's the choice of council.
A common theme that's been running around town ever since I've been here is there's nothing for the kids to do. And if this is upgraded a little bit, you might be able to get some more recreation from early teens to late teens. Give them something to do that would be kind of wholesome and good for them.
Which one, that pickleball or the?
Either one. It's going to filter down with the kids. They probably think it's for old folks right now. They'll get smart.
on this, Mayor, on this community church thing, that's something we talked about several years ago, but I personally think we need to jump on this. I don't know if that's something we can vote on today or we have to wait till
can.
Monday. But I would like to see that on the agenda for the Monday meeting.
Okay,
How old is this equipment?
well, it's about 10 years old, isn't it?
Does it meet current
Mr. Hall?
safety standards, I wonder?
I'm not sure exactly the age of the equipment, but it appears to be in pretty good shape.
It's
When I
not
went over and looked
weathered?
at it, no ma'am, it doesn't appear to have any damage to it or deterioration that I noticed when I was over there looking at it.
Okay,
Yeah, I'd like to see that on the agenda too.
all right, so we'll have it on the
Maybe
agenda.
If we could find out the original cost of it, what it would cost us if we had to buy it new, what roughly the savings would be. Just-
I think what we really need to know is staff going to do the move, or are you going to hire someone?
Oh, we would have to hire somebody, and so we would look for quotes from individuals such as Earthworks and of the like that has the equipment to be able to move it and then reinstall it.
This is out of order, but do you know if Irby's missing a piece of equipment?
I'm sorry.
Do you know if Irby's missing a piece of equipment? It's parked in my parking lot at Santa Fe.
We can find out. Okay.
It's a little front loader, a skid. Somebody parked it over the weekend and has not come back to pick it up. And it's unlocked and the lights are flashing.
Want to go get it?
Well,
What is it?
Front load.
you
How
wanna-
you know?
And I don't know that there's been any state work going on that they would have brought down the equipment to park it someplace.
I know that they were doing some form of construction outside of city limits on 21 near the college, but I can't imagine that it would have been left there for that long.
Yeah, it's just weird. Okay, so we move on. We have the Trailhead, the Nature Park, and Pickleball Courts.
So the Trailhead, we do have phase 3, which is the restrooms in the pavilion area. We're looking at the cost of roughly about $100,000, rough guess, just based on what our bids came back the last time that we put the entire thing out. With that being said, it is out there to be completed, but I would recommend that with some of the conversations that I've had with council, that the beach in town is a little bit more of a higher priority, and then put this into our master plan if council decides to move forward with that.
I kind of like that idea.
And
I would
this-
love to see a match or a CDBG grant
Yes.
fund that.
And then the same with the natural park. It's really an underutilized park. There's so much more potential there, but that's something that I think that we would have to work with our engineer to discuss what we could possibly do our full potential for that area. The next one is the pickleball court. This is separate. We do have a couple of options if council would like to move forward quickly with the pickleball court that's at Sunrise. We have everything from taking up the plastic that's there and look at possibility of reselling it to water treatment facilities as suggested by the manufacturer, and then look at just restriping that specific court. That came out to be roughly about $4,000, all the way to about $11,000 to do a complete resurface and fill in some of those cracks, and it will cost roughly about $3,000 plus the cost of a light to get an additional light out there.
Well, and I'll go back. In the county's plan, do they plan to light the courts out at
Twin Lake?
Twin Lakes?
I believe so. That was the conversation that I had this morning.
So if they're going to light the courts and they're going to be holding tournaments out there, it's almost, in my opinion, not a waste of money, but I don't know that ours would have the highest and best use.
And if the slab is
I
uneven
agree with that.
already, you'd almost have to do a complete redo, wouldn't you, to make it smooth enough to satisfy the pickleball players that know what they're doing.
It's not a huge hardship for residents to drive out to Twin Lakes and use those courts.
Something, if I may, something you might consider is when you have large spaces like a tennis court or those basketball courts, you can actually maximize that space just with striping alone. And so as long as you have an even play surface, it really doesn't hinder what I would consider neighborhood sports type basketball to have something striped separately where you can just bring a net in to fit it. So a lot of the parks that we've worked on, especially in Gainesville, are very multi-use. There is no single-use platform, because in all reality, it would not be unrealistic to say in 3 or 4 years that the pickleball phase changes somehow. So when you design something that's very specific, it forces the municipality to spend money in just one thing. Whereas if you have a nice, solid, stable piece of concrete, slab of concrete rather, you can refigure that to whatever the new trend is.
And I prefer that plan at
Yeah.
this point. I mean, I love the court out there. I think it's a beautiful court, but I really prefer keeping it up here and doing the restripe here. Is there consensus on that? Okay.
As if you guys ever get the opportunity to go into Gainesville, I would encourage you to check out Northside Park.
Okay.
It's a very interesting area. It's on the west side of 441, south of 53rd. We just finalized that design. I'm not saying it just because we worked on it, but actually it's a very interesting park design because it's adjacent to the senior center. And so the goal of the park was to encourage seniors to bring their grandchildren out there. And so the dynamics of it are very interesting. And so a lot of thought was taken into account to ensure that Northside Park met the needs of the greater community, not just a single offset like children.
Okay. That'll be, yeah, I'd like to take a look at that. That sounds interesting. All right, second page. We're moving into Wi-Fi.
We're moving into smart cities and Wi-Fi. Yes, ma'am.
Smart cities and Wi-Fi. We start by the leading edge, and now we're going to cutting edge.
Absolutely. So this was actually brought to me from DRMP, the Smart Cities Infrastructure Investment. I've had conversations with Mr. Clayton Levins. He presented here at the second to last council meeting about the Smart North Florida and his role there. This is something just to kind of start conversations about becoming a smart city and kind of exploring that whole movement and what that looks like for our city and how we can benefit from it. With that being said, there's potential for grant funding on what this looks like, and then there's also DRMP has probably capability of having consultants on what that's going to look like, as well as Smart North Florida does as well. So if that's a direction that council would like to look at to move forward, we can start having some of those conversations, bring in presenters, and educate council on what that actually looks like.
I'd love it.
Perfect. So
Anybody else?
Yeah, I agree.
Down the brown end? Okay.
With that being said, downtown Wi-Fi is a good start with the Smart Cities initiative. There's two ways that we can look at it. One is by laying our own fiber, and then the other for broadband and things of that, and start within our downtown area and then moving out as time allows and funding allows. The next is to complete quickly the goal of getting Wi-Fi within our downtown area, which is going to be by way of repeaters. And so they're two very different infrastructures. One is just taking our Wi-Fi and continuing bouncing it down into the light, or down to the light, and then the other one is putting in solid infrastructure that we can expand on in years to come.
Would that be the first versus the second?
Pardon?
Would it be the cheaper one versus the more expensive one?
Yes, and so I've got them both as downtown or Wi-Fi zone downtown, and then citywide broadband / downtown, because we would start within our downtown area. And so you're looking at, I have a scope and fee from our current IT, New River Technologies, of roughly about $30,000 to expand the Wi-Fi via repeaters. And then it's going to cost upwards of $50,000 or so to do a broadband or a fiber solution to that within the downtown area. I can say this is that if we do the repeaters, which is the fix now, getting Wi-Fi quickly down there, for $30,000, we do not have to go out for bid. That's within our contract with New River Technologies. If we do the fiber broadband option within the downtown area, we will have to put that out for an RFP.
Okay, so I'm a little confused.
Sure.
Stay with me. So my understanding is, initially we were talking about repeaters down, all the way down based on what we already built here in our parks.
That's correct.
The repeaters would be the 50,000?
The repeaters are the 30,000.
Okay, so the repeaters are the 30,000, that's what we're on now.
That's what's within our parks, that's taking that signal and throwing it down to the light, for lack of a better word. And Mr. Richard can probably speak to that as well.
Okay, so is that, let me ask, I'm not a techie, sorry. But if you're repeating the signal, does it get weaker the further you get away, or is it as strong where the repeater is here as it is down at the beach?
Yes, ma'am. You have the law of diminishing returns every time you repeat it.
Yeah, so I don't think we want to do that.
And just as our parks are here, and I don't mean to interrupt, but we do have specific gadgets, if you will, to help amplify and draw that signal. It will not be like dial-up internet by the time you get down to the light, but there will be a change.
Okay, so I don't want to change.
I'm sorry?
I
You don't
want
want to change? Fair enough.
I don't want it to change.
Where would these repeaters be located?
On top of our light poles.
Okay, so they're gonna be subject to weather and so on.
Oh, yes.
Useful
they are
life,
now.
maybe 5 years,
They're
something
built
like
for
that.
that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they're being subjected to it now in the
Yeah,
parks.
yeah. And what if technology changes? I don't know, like you, I'm not a techie, but I know there's different rates of G, I think it is. And what if technology changes and these all of a sudden become antiques? and
Well-
They don't work.
Upgrade.
Mo-
Yeah,
Most,
you have to
most
upgrade.
telephone technology, you would be able to double the capacity, double or triple the distance it would serve. It's not gonna be a redo like going from copper to fiber. It's gonna be, you're gonna be able to utilize what you've got there by just adding on different repeaters, different things like that
Okay.
that make it work.
I'm just saying, if the equipment goes bad in 5 years, we're out $30,000. I'd rather, if we're gonna do something like this, go with the 50 with conduit and do it right.
So,
Go ahead.
so let me finish. The 50,000 is the repeater system.
No, the 50,000, and I'm saying 50 plus, and so it's gonna, minimum cost of roughly around $50,000 is going to be fiber throughout the downtown area only.
Okay. So we do the better system, whatever the better system is.
So with that being said, I think that that this all falls into that smart cities investment. And if that's truly a conversation that council's looking at having for the future, then let me sit down with both our engineer and then Smart North Florida to start bringing you options as far as
Okay.
what you want to see and what the bigger picture is.
Okay, I prefer that. Council?
I know we discussed this a while back, but I'm just, either way, is this taking the place of people in the business district not having to pay for, and I'm gonna just throw out some company names like AT&T, Comcast, I have AT&T at my house for my web, so if I was downtown, I wouldn't have to pay that extra thing for internet? Is that what this?
I'm not an IT professional, but the way you have a conduit bank available, that's an open line right now. And so the goal, from my perspective, would be to run fiber through that. So that basically, as opposed to drilling a bunch of wells, you're gonna put in a main line, right? So instead of everyone being on a well, you're gonna have a main water line. What that does is you know, the Wi-Fi component, once you have fiber, those businesses could come into the fiber. So fiber was introduced to the airport recently because there was a huge need for fiber, and the speed at which, you know, you have the availability for internet to Wi-Fi is pretty impressive. And so this is, I mean, fiber is being seen as one of the largest infrastructure upgrades that anyone can make. It is just as important as water in today's technology. So this is an observation. It's not a criticism, but the availability of that kind of infrastructure, it would be a massive improvement to downtown. But you would also essentially be providing free Wi-Fi to the public. And it's not going to, but there's going to be two benefits, right? Now you're going to be able to, now businesses in the downtown core could tie into that fiber line if they chose to. But in addition to that, you would have Wi-Fi service that would be available to the greater public. And that's where the smart cities really comes into play.
And that would tend to draw in more high-quality businesses from out of town because it's part of the infrastructure. It would be a big draw, I would think.
Big.
Yeah.
Big something.
It's one of the biggest questions asked when you're looking at real estate in 2021 is, what's your availability to high-speed internet?
Yeah,
And high-speed now is even a different question, you know?
And so your question about Gs, that
Yeah.
would be solved with fiber,
Right.
right?
Yes.
And perhaps to offset some of the costs and perhaps take a little of the sting out of providing all free, perhaps have two different rate structures for our business tax or business registration fee, the $25 I think it is.
I really think you should offer it for free because
Yeah.
it really does need to be part of the infrastructure
Yeah.
of investing in your dollars in our town, in my
Well, the
opinion.
thing about it too is, to get this free Wi-Fi, they're gonna have to travel to our city limits. And then maybe they'll buy lunch, maybe they'll, whatever. But it's not like they can use our Wi-Fi at their home 7 miles away or 3 miles spot on, you gotta be here to use it. While you're using it, I see.
I think
Merchants you'd like to help out.
I'd rather see going with $50,000, state of the art, rather than putting a Band-Aid on it that might not last more than 3, 4, 5 years.
I agree.
Another question. How about the commercial circle with the businesses on there? Are we looking at going down that way?
It's not my decision, but I do remember AT&T putting in fiber that crossed over State Road 21 recently.
Yes.
But I don't know where the service truncates. I don't know the whole line work for it.
Well, those guys, on my way up here, AT&T is in my neck of the woods right now with some big trucks, and they're surveying and doing that. I don't know what the heck they're doing, but
I don't know either.
but it's not the regular telephone man. So
Well, it's also a project that we could look at down the road, Tony, in terms of bringing smart cities to that commercial circle areas. I would be in favor of that. Again, you know, we don't offer a lot of services as a city.
No.
And so if we make a minimum investment in providing Wi-Fi to anyone who wants to use it, I think that puts us in a position of advantage in terms of recruiting some light industrial businesses down to commercial circle.
well, you know, when this first got brought up, I was against.
I remember.
So, but, and a lot had to do with people hanging out in the park late at night, and I'm out and about, and I don't see that happening. I mean, it might be, but I don't see that happening.
Can you check usage, Ms. Rakowski?
I'm sorry?
Overnight, can you check usage, Wi-Fi usage? If you went into the server, could you say, oh, 3 people use the Wi-Fi between the hours of midnight and 6?
Well, so yes, the short answer is yes. Our Wi-Fi within the park right now is shut off overnight, but we can capture those analytics of when it's being used.
So there you go, no Wi-Fi at night. Okay, so we are generally in favor of the $50,000.
So that's something that, as under the Smart Cities investment, then I'll start conversations with GRMP and then also Smart North Florida to work in bringing options and having conversations of what that looks like for the city of Keystone Heights.
All right, fantastic. Stormwater retrofit, advanced treatment and maintenance project.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So there's very limited stormwater treatment within Keystone Heights, within the city limits, and even beyond city limits, to be honest with you. And so when we evaluate the asset as far as our lakes go, it's commonly seen as, you know, obviously the water height is very important. The water levels are very important. However, we'll quickly see that water quality can be very important as well. There are sections of Florida that, unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, you cannot recreate in that water. I'm not going to say that Lake Geneva will ever get there. I hope that it never comes to that point. But when you look at a drainage infrastructure within the city limits, there is no primary treatment before it enters our surface waters. And so this is somewhat common in older communities that were mainly built up prior to current water management district standards that basically started in 1984 and then transitioned in 1993. There are some opportunities to do advanced treatment in the facilities that we have. There are some stormwater retention basins and some sediment basins. However, there are also areas that basically are direct piped into Lake Geneva and other lakes as well. And so I brought this up. I brought this up to myself personally in being here and living here and thinking about, well, how does the drainage system work? And the vast majority of rainfall goes from asphalt and it goes into our lakes. And so there are programs such as the Water Management District's cost share program that will assist with that. And so they'll assist with the funding and they'll assist with the implementation. In some cases, they'll even assist with the resources and the talent to help with that. I would not be doing my job if I didn't at least propose it to council that you consider that, because as we increase the size, the community size, and the amount of impervious in this area, if we're not following up with the infrastructure that treats the water from a denitrification standpoint and any other harmful components that we put into the water, then we're not doing a service to our long-term assets, which this is a lake area region. So as long as if your lake levels are high, but the water quality is low, is it still really the lake area region, or we just have a lot of water around us?
Yeah. I'm all about the studies tonight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, we're gonna have a lot of water, we hope, in about 2 years, so this is something that probably should be fast-tracked as much as possible.
So, to the best of my recollection, I believe the district's cost share funding is due January 17th. So if you wish to pursue that, the city will need to decide how they want to pursue it. If you want to do it this year, that is definitely a possibility, but it's gonna have to happen very quickly. The alternative to that could be that we lay some groundwork and then set the stage of success for next year. And that's just those are your two primary options.
Let me check in with staff. How hard do you want to work?
So this will truly be a partnership between the city and DRMP. I would, that if this is the will of the council, then we can talk about this on the agenda for Monday, as far as what a scope and fee might look like, and if there's dollars that you want to spend from the city's budget at that.
May I make a suggestion? What might be the best approach is to set up a meeting with the district's cost share program management team. Lynn and I could have an introductory. We could basically talk about it and see if, in order to meet their cost share funding arrangement, how much effort would need to be completed to do that. And if we believe that we don't have the resources and or the time to complete that before January, we will have had that discussion, and then we can take a little bit of a pause and then get it set up for being implemented next year at the council's discretion. You might be surprised how much energy it takes, how much resources it takes to get a stormwater master plan put together.
Okay. Well, we're leaning on you. I think based on the will of the council, it's important. So the sooner we can have that in place, I think that the better we will all feel.
And I think Rob Bradley would see the big picture here because he's been such a proponent of the Black Creek project.
Certainly.
They sort of tie in together.
Certainly, and there's been a lot of attention there's been a lot of good information and a good exchange with the Water Management District. I feel quite confident that the Water Management District would want to participate in this, but in order to get a firm grasp as to ensure that we meet all of the requirements for the cost share, I think a 1 or 2 or 5 hour session with the project team at the Water Management District would be your best investment now.
Okay.
You're gonna spend a lot of money to have clear water come in and then to have it. I don't think you're gonna get algae bloom or anything like that, but still, you need to
Yes.
have clear water.
There's a lot of opportunity to decrease nutrients
Yeah.
and harmful, everything that comes off of asphalt, let's just say that.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
if I may suggest regarding our lakes, I know that there's been some conversations with the county, with Ms. Vivian Katz and with Lake Region Development Corporation on the future, some cost share projects with the district. I know that Commissioner Condon has had conversations about the possibility of clean out of the fallout of Alligator Creek coming into Lake Geneva as well. And so I don't want to do a combative efforts. If it's the will of the council to bring everybody together and to really look at the best use of our lakes and where our money and where our time is best spent, so that we're not duplicating grants or doing competing grants.
That
with
sounds
that.
like a good idea.
So with that being said, I'd like to, let me talk to Commissioner Condon and then Ms. Vivian and Mr. Cornegay as far as what everybody's collectively thinking, so that we don't have the county putting in for a grant to clean out while we're putting in something for cost shares for stormwater and things of that nature.
Yeah, and I really feel like, I really feel like the city should be involved in the cost share program too, so.
I just have a question, since we got Highway 100, we got Highway 21, would the Department of Transportation be a part of a stormwater treatment program?
It's not unrealistic to make that ask. And so there are no defined treatment areas for those two major highways. It's all at grade storm inlets, and then that goes into another plumbing system, and we don't really know how the underground infrastructure looks like. I would also like to add that as part of this, more than likely, to the best of my knowledge, the city hasn't had the opportunity to clean out the stormwater system. There are a lot of great inlets that don't work in some cases. And so this would also incorporate kind of scoping out those areas, a clean out. You know, you've seen those big vac trucks that come in. And so that is a big component of it too, because when you get sediment and other debris that collect in your stormwater management system, that actually creates a flooding issue too. And so there's kind of a greater scheme to this. It's not just roadside treatment. It's really looking at it from a community perspective and ensuring that the infrastructure is appropriate to meet our current and future needs.
Well, and that's a great point, Chad. It is kind of funny. Recently, we had a 4-foot alligator in the retention pond over by the Catholic Church. I got numbers of calls, and many of them from the elementary school, and they were worried about some drainage being, allowing that alligator onto school board property. And it's kind of like, I don't think the alligator can get from the retention pond but we don't know, because we haven't looked at the systems around the elementary school. So I think it's a good study. Okay? So we have a consensus then about stormwater.
Before we let Mr. Rashar sit down, there's 2 other items that I would like for council just to have conversations with, and Mr. Rashar can help with this discussion as well. We've had 2 proposed developments, both Country Meadows and then the Roberts development. Both have kind of stalled at the moment. One of the hurdles is bringing infrastructure to that property.
Water and sewer.
Water, sewer to the property. And so I know that we've had conversations that there's possible of funding available, and then also utilizing our ARP funding to help expand that within our right-of-way up to the property to help alleviate the cost of any developer, regardless if it's Country Meadows or Roberts development that comes in, to make those parcels more attractive.
So do we know how much that's going to cost?
I don't know there's, again, that's going to have to be a conversation with CCUA, and that involves a little bit of work and then cost from our engineer as well. I wanted to have this conversation with council to see if this is something that you would be interested in putting some of our ARP funding towards, and then we can also look at CDBG funding as well to help offset those costs.
To answer your specific question, no, we don't have enough information to come up with some level of probable cost at this point. Now, CCUA has come up with a value associated with that. I haven't seen that information. I haven't vetted it. I'm under the working impression that it should be accurate. But in addition, when you look at infrastructure improvements, it's wise to look at what your current needs are, but what your anticipated needs are as well, because you might as well go ahead and within reason, right? You don't want to, put in a 12-inch main line.
Right.
But if an 8-inch is what's called for today to meet the minimum requirements for such a development, you might consider a 10-inch in order to support future development or a stem or what have you. So.
Right. Well, and for me, just a minute, Ms. Brown. For me, I believe that wouldn't it be easier on the Roberts property to bring water sewer there since it's on 21?
I can make an observation based on our experience. It's very common for a municipality to invest in some level of infrastructure.
Sure.
And then that helps offset the upfront cost for a developer, recognizing that the city would appreciate the revenue generated from property taxes and
Right,
everything else
absolutely.
associated with it.
Absolutely.
So it's a very similar discussion we had with Wi-Fi. Water, Wi-Fi, in my mind, might as well be the same thing.
Yeah.
That raises the question, though, these are going to be residential and they're going to be homesteaded, and would we really get much of a payback on the tax increase? So my view is perhaps the developer should bear, if not all, a great portion of that cost, because they're the ones selling lots and making a profit. That's just my gut feeling on it. But I don't think if we stood the cost of this 100%, we would never get the money back out of it.
Well, we talked about cost share, though, with the Water Management District in terms of
Right.
doing a match, right?
So the Water Management District discussion was different. So that would be for the stormwater infrastructure. This discussion, if I've understood correctly, is for potable water and wastewater lines to be brought in close to where the development would be, and then picked up by the developer.
They would
Yes.
pick it up from there.
Yes, sir.
The Roberts property should have it right there on 21. That was the point, because they brought commercial water through 21, and all of those businesses had to hook up.
You know, all this, there's sewer lines that
And
runs
the
up
one-
behind Johnny's, all the
Yep.
way to the American Legion, if I'm not mistaken. There's lift stations. There's a lift station right there behind CarQuest, if I'm not mistaken.
What often happens too, though, is it's more than likely that lift station would have to be improved
Oh,
to
yeah.
meet the
Yeah,
capacity of
exactly.
perhaps 161 homes. So
Right.
Exactly.
Another consideration too would be, you mentioned more development, and if there were an agreement that there would be an annexation where we could pick up some more land and have some commercial property that would really help our tax base, then it would make some sense.
Yeah, I agree. I'm having to be very thoughtful with how I respond to some of this, but
Of course.
I'm looking at it from a municipal development standpoint and how municipalities make good decisions in annexing property when it's adjacent to yours, when it would be suitable for that kind of development, is often a very wise choice moving forward.
Well, and it does open up a bit. I know I've talked with Ms. Rakowski about a survey on Linwood Drive. It abuts the Roberts property. Mr. Redfern,
On what drive?
Linwood.
Okay.
And we can offer that street something, right?
Yep.
In terms of upgrading their roads and providing some infrastructure, maybe some water, whatever. And so some of this stuff, I think we really do have to be forward-thinking. I
Yep.
think we need to be not aggressive, but I think we need to say, this is important. We only have really 2 lots available to us now to build out what is now city limits. And if we want to annex some of the property around the Roberts property, there's, 27 acres and 4 parcels around that property, if you look on the property appraiser's website. That gives us an opportunity then to look at larger properties and ask people what they want to do.
Well, and if we cost share on something like that, it's going to give us some bargaining position for the developer of the property to want to annex.
Yes.
And that'd be part of the deal.
So, will of the council. I need my glasses. I actually wasn't on the list, but I feel like we should move forward and have the conversations about extending it. I think we would have more cost directed towards the 13 acres on Sunrise than we really would with the Roberts property, unless the lift stations are just hugely expensive.
I don't know at this time.
I appreciate that, yeah. What do you think?
The Roberts property, is that Temple's old
Yes.
property? Okay. Are they moving forward, or are they in a holding pattern with that?
Both developments have, I don't want to say that they haven't pulled back, they've stalled. I believe that Roberts is looking at some different opportunities elsewhere at the moment that they're moving on. And then Country Meadows, their biggest concern right now is the cost of water sewer hookup. And so they're looking at how to overcome that hurdle. They were given a price from CCUA that it would cost them roughly about $300,000 to bring water sewer to the property and then to develop from there.
How much?
$300,000.
And is that going to be, it's not going to be a real high-end development? Is that your feeling, or do you have a feel as to what they have in mind?
The only thing that I've had is conversations with the developer at this time. They're looking at, forgive me, so they're looking at modular. Yeah, modular. There's mobile manufactured and then modular. So they're looking at bringing in modular homes. It's going to look just as it did, except for they're going to be on a foundation and that they will be taxable. We will collect some ad valorem from that.
I am certainly in favor of looking at infrastructure for the Roberts property. I think that property is more valuable to us in terms of development.
I don't think it would cost us as much for the Roberts than it would the other, because your structure, you got a water main that runs down through there, you got a sewer line that's already there, and tapping into that's gonna be a lot cheaper than,
That's what I believe.
and
I don't
I
know.
think my opinion is we go for that one, because that's in well, both of them are good locations, but that one is a big piece of property, and it's there where commercial is and everything, so.
And we could bring something more towards commercial. We could,
Now, if Country Metals were to come in with a commercial development where the tax payback would make sense, then I can see that we could participate. But for modest homes and the homestead exemptions and so on, I'm just concerned for the taxpayers. That might become a burden.
Well, again, these are all projects looking at council of what your interests are, because there's going to be a heavy lift between both city staff and an engineer and different kinds of communication with other agencies. And so it's just a matter of where your priorities are. We'll finalize this list and bring it to
Yeah.
council for approval where we're going to put our efforts.
Yeah, I think looking into the Roberts thing, as Tony has suggested, is a smart way to go.
One last thing is, I've been doing this for a while, and our carrot's always been in the ground. We've never had one to wiggle because we've talked and talked for years about annexation. And like you said, Mayor, services. What do we provide in the way of service? We have the greatest parks in downtown city and everything looks great. But if you don't have some type of service to provide for them, I mean, and I think doing something like what you're talking about would bring the rest of that corridor, maybe to the bridge.
Yeah.
So,
One other thing to consider is I know that the proposed Roberts development is what's being discussed tonight, but it's not to say that another developer might not be interested in it as well.
Right.
So once you have water, wastewater, you open the door to a variety of different types, and you don't have to be concerned about what's being proposed today from a residential and a multifamily standpoint, because you don't know whom else might be interested in the property. Property
it could be light industrial
trades
or
around a
something,
lot.
yeah.
Could be a shopping center with a Publix, who knows?
oh,
It's
boy.
it's an unknown.
Could be an elementary school. Just saying.
Well, we don't get no taxes off of that.
That's true.
Yeah, it could be anything.
Okay, and then we under school support, these are two ideas I brought. What was the name of the mayor that we listened to that one day? Mr. Cornegay, do you remember? St. Pete. Yeah, St. Pete's guy.
Yeah, St. Pete,
Rick Baker. Rick Baker gave us each a book. Do you remember that? J.J. Harris brought books out to us, and it was about building cities, and he had done some phenomenal things when he was mayor and understood the participation in municipalities in developing lots of different advantages. And when we were talking about raising taxes to pay first responders, this idea came back to me. It was in his book. It was called the A+ Housing Program. And what it did was it offered, by application, it offered teachers in that school district $20,000 as a down payment for a home in the city. And over time, if they stayed in that school, or if they stayed in that school for 10 years, that $20,000 would be forgiven. And I bring that back up here just for discussion, because wouldn't it be fantastic to be able to locate a first responder or a teacher working in our elementary school for a long period of time? I think it would be a unique carrot, as Mr. Brown used the word carrot, to attract some really stable families to our community and offering some type of program like this. And so I will give you guys each a copy. This is what St. Pete did. Can you pass one down to Miss Lynn so she can put it in the record? And so that was the A+ teacher housing. And the next one was the top administrator program, which Mr. Baker also rolled out in St. Pete. And I'm not so attached to this one. I really am attached to the housing program. And I think it would be a cool way to again, support first responders and teachers.
Where do you draw the line? Do we want to also attract dentists and doctors and lawyers?
Yeah, why not?
And give them a down payment money? I don't know where you would stop with that.
I think you can really clearly define it, either for teachers or for first responders.
That's a
Um,
rhetorical question. I don't think there's an answer.
Okay, so I just offer that, and then What is the law enforcement support, Ms. Rakowski?
This was something that you had mentioned the night of the town hall about the
Oh,
tax
this is the same
increase.
thing.
Yes, so
Okay.
it's along the same thing, but
Right.
it's offering funding directly to
Yeah.
law enforcement as opposed to going to an individual.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to go to Sheriff Cook and say, hey, look, we have a carrot for attracting a new deputy to our city. I think it'd be a fun time. All right, so now we need to talk about money.
So I have down here, just for your visibility, for your information, I put down our CIP current. We have $365,000 in the bank. We're projected for an additional $164,000 this year. Of that, 82.5 is currently allocated with sidewalks and then funding for some planning. With that being said, we do have softly allocated the $280,000 if it decides to come out of CIP versus the ARP funding for the restroom facilities down at the beach. ARP funding, we received $384,000 of the fourth quarter of last fiscal year that's in the bank, and then we are going to get another $384,000 this fiscal year for a combined total of $768,000. We are required to spend ARP funding within the next 5 years. What we don't spend, we give back. And so those are just, as we start talking, having conversations of what our plans are going to be, that's where we're at currently financially. What I would ask council to consider is over the next couple of days, I do have meetings, my one-on-ones start on Thursday through Friday. Let's talk about this list. Give me your thoughts, ideas, and what are your priorities, and then we'll bring it again back to council for possibly a vote on how the city would like to move forward, not necessarily spending dollars, but planning to spend dollars where we put in our efforts.
Can, Mr. Kirkland, do you mind coming up for just a minute? I want to make sure I understand. And I know you guys can't speak to each other, so
Well, and this is a noticed meeting, so we are under the sunshine. This
Okay.
is a noticed meeting. There's no decisions that are being made, but
Okay.
everything is documented.
all right, I just don't want to get anybody in trouble.
Sure.
Question for you. For the feasibility study, does the airport have a little bit of money to match if we fund the rest of it, most of it?
Yes, and as far as that specific number, I kind of have an idea of maybe 25,000. I'd have to get back with Maria and our accountant and then bring that to the board, obviously for their review and approval. I know in some of the meetings that I've had with staff and Maria, we talked about the cost sharing part of maybe even some Bradford County funding. I don't know if that's feasible or not.
I don't think I would want them being involved. I just wanted, to see if the airport could do a little something. If we did the rest and we got this thing knocked out, would that be satisfactory to?
Without a doubt. The whole thing that drove this is this conversation we've been having for 4 years now with CCUA. And Jeremy, at our last meeting, said, well, look, this is what I need. I've got to have something in front of me from a feasibility standpoint of what's being proposed with the new idea of using the existing water sewer that comes up and then dead ends, but connecting there and extending onto the airport. So this has really got to happen before we can move forward.
So I'd like to propose that we move this to the top of the list as one of our asks from our ARP funding. I think it's super important. Mr. Hart, did you want to add to that?
I agree. It's obviously going to benefit the airport, but also looking more regionally and what this will bring in north of town, heading out of town, and the dollars that are going to be coming into town as more construction, commercial construction happens down the road. I think this is a great investment. I think we should do it, and I think we should put it right at the top, very top.
Is there a consensus to move it to the top? Yes? Okay. So we're moving the Keystone Airport feasibility study to the top.
Well, on behalf of the board, thank you. We greatly appreciate that, and we'll certainly see what we can do to contribute. to that as well.
Okay?
I'll continue conversations with Mr. Kirkland. If this is the priority of the council, run this through our partners at Clay County to make sure that we are going to stay compliant with ARP funding, and hopefully bring this back by the
Okay, so
Monday's
if they
council
take
meeting.
25, if they're able to contribute 25,000, then we're looking at 115, at 110.
Maximum, I believe, Mr. Prang is not here, but the 135,000 was his cap. He believed that there's a possibility of coming in under that.
Okay, so we're cool. So we can use that number 110 for our purposes in terms of starting to add up the ARP money? Anything else you want from us this evening?
So with this list, this is a pretty extensive list, but I wanted to bring council together and just
Oh,
see.
Parks and Rec, we need to do Parks and Rec master plan.
Parks and Rec master plan, but to see if there's anything additional that council would like to see added, so I can start those conversations in fact finding.
The stormwater.
Yeah, Stormwater, Parks and Rec master plan. We agreed on the $5,000 for the park equipment,
We'll talk about, will that be moved to the agenda for
right?
Monday?
And then we
And
also,
then the other item to consider and have conversations over the next couple of days is gonna be that $280,000 for the restrooms. That's, we're already under contract with Shear Construction to go ahead and move forward and figure out which pot, what that looks like. And we can have a more of a conversation and decision Monday night.
And that in the stage, and just point of information, the community band is gonna be starting up in January again, so hopefully we'll be able to use this, probably not by this spring, but maybe sometime next year.
Well, the restrooms will take, permitting, with permitting and everything, they're suspecting that less than 3 months to get through permitting plans, inspections and whatnot.
Yeah, I'm thinking more of the covered
Right,
stage.
and then if that's a priority as
Yeah.
well, then we can talk about.
With the 280 in the restrooms, does that take care of the ticket house too, or is that something different? We talked about taking that out.
That's gonna take care of the ticket house as well.
Okay.
So that, included in the restrooms will be the removal of that, structure right as you walk into the park.
okay. So anything else for the good of the order?
It's possible you may have missed one item, that was a discussion regarding, the potential for expanding City Hall.
Oh, we did.
So expanding City Hall, this is a conversation that we've had every couple of years. This was brought for this project list by DRMP, but just for full visibility, I've had conversations with the county as potential partnerships. So this is being looked at. There is a need to expand City Hall, to remodel, renovate, and move forward with this. There's potential for partnerships with the county of merging some of our services together under one building and looking at that.
Perhaps a
Okay.
sheriff's substation area, would that be a possibility?
Nothing is off the table right now, so
Okay,
we're
okay.
under a very large conversation of what this would look like.
Okay,
If I was a commissioner, I would look at, I'm paying rent for this building and rent for this building, and if they could come in and put their funds into the city hall and make everything where everybody comes here, that would be a very smart move.
Yeah, perhaps a county annex type of thing where people can pay taxes and such.
okay.
Yeah.
Anything else for the good of the order? Great conversation.